Hello, dear friends and comrades, live. Your favorite 60 Minutes on the Hot Trail begins with breaking news from the front. So there are reports that the Russian army has completely taken control of the Canal micro-district. The landing assault groups of the 98th Division in the Far Eastern Flag distinguished themselves in the Clock Yard. A canal has already been built there in the micro-district. Near Turetsky, Russian units pushed back another 2 kilometers towards the city. Enemy resources write that the defensive enemy also managed to break through the southeast corner of Dara in the Avdiivsky direction. Soldiers of the center group of forces burned another American Abrams tank, as you can see in the footage. The strike was carried out by a high-precision Krasno field from an MSTAC howitzer. Fierce fighting continues for Volchansk, where in SUA, or rather, personally, Zelensky does not lose hope of improving his position before the NATO summit in America. Zhenya is being obtained by the Ukrainian General Staff through meat counterattacks. The eastern Volchanskaya Viso are also trying to find weak points in Russia's defense. The enemy pulled up the reserves and threw them at the settlement of Glubokaya. However, the success of the OSSU did not have all such an account of the brigade of the defeated Ukrainian forces, rolled back Podlepsy with heavy losses. In turn, the Russian army carried out a counterattack on the village of Prilipke, where one of the main feeding points of the entire Volchansk group of the enemy is located. Now the offensive is advancing towards the village of William, and as soon as the village is taken, Ukrainian militants in Volchansk will fall into a kind of encirclement when supplies are completely disrupted, but they are now going to attack without toilet paper due to mobilization. One of the largest enterprises in Kiev, and this is not a joke, the papier production enterprise may close. The talking head of the Kiev regime, former company commander of the National Battalion Aidar Diki, at the same time, he said today, we need more people to start winning. 500,000 more soldiers need to be mobilized in this war. Such an ambitious goal Ukrainian TCK Verkhovna Rada are trying to implement, and they do it in a 24/7 mode. As of July 16th, all subpoenas sent by registered mail will be considered automatically served. This was stated by the Speaker of the Ministry of Defense, Lazutkin. In general, see Europe. Well, if 500,000 soldiers are still not recruited, then Zelensky will be able to replenish the treasury for the grinning people. The criminal Kiev regime has introduced new punitive measures. Each ignored summons will cost 25,000 UAH. Translated into our 50,000 rubles, they came up with bank money. What to do with those who don't have money? In this case, the confiscation of property is provided up to the only housing of the evader. That is, it is expensive only at the front. Were all the Malbays of Kiev unsuccessful in transferring one Spanish battery to RK Pyotr? According to El Periódico, Zelensky asked Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez to give Kiev an American battery for RK, which belongs to Spain, but has been in Turkey for 9 years and is covering an American air base. Endlich, but Madrid said no, so the only help Kiev can hope for is again the State Department. They are going to allow you to do this with American weapons on Russian territory at a distance of now 300 kilometers. That is exactly 3 times farther than right now. In other words, the so-called creeping escalation in France against the background of the parliamentary elections, again, the scandal disappeared. The president has disappeared in every sense of the word, both physically and politically. The last time Emmanuel was seen last week on the coast in Letuc with his wife Bridget. Bloomberg agency in this regard reports that after the announcement of the results, it became clear that the presidential coalition in the pit of power in the country seized Marine Le Pen. T reports that after the defeat in the elections, Macron hid in the police palace and convened a cabinet of ministers of politics. After O2 and Bao, the meetings left the palace with gloomy faces. Prime Minister Gabriel Opal descended the palace stairs instead of the parade. Agriculture Minister Anjespanya Runaher gestured anxiously while talking to someone on the phone. France is on the verge of political disaster. Terrified Attal, in a party address to the nation, urged not to vote for specific preferred candidates, but simply to vote against Le Pen, to rule out the triumph of the right-wing expulsion, right now coming out the so-called three candidates. But that is, Taigovarnyak leaves everyone who has the least chance of winning. According to the newspaper, Lemon, at least 218 candidates left the race, including 131 representatives of the left-wing New Popular Front, 82 people from the presidential bloc. In general, the tactic is very simple: anything for money, as long as Le Pen does not allow her 28-year-old protégé Bardel. There was no Russian trace here. The National Union, in addition to NATO and Euroscepticism, is united in close ties with Russia, personally with Vladimir Putin. If the plans come true in the summer, her victory will certainly find the intervention of official Moscow. Rakophobic Rus, a key British think tank, published an article today titled "Methodology of Degradation of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation." Under such, therefore, the same name is hidden a description of the results of the two-year sanctions policy. But despite the loud headline, the conclusions, sadly, sanctions don't work. Russia's production of modern missile weapons is growing rapidly. The British painfully report that our domestic industry was able to adapt and, despite its dependence on imported microelectronics, not only retain the ability to produce modern weapons, but also effectively increase the pace of this production. Another disappointing conclusion for the West was made by the so-called Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Simply put, such an office of the European Union, which gives forecasts about the success of developing countries in 2023. The organization predicted a decline of the Russian economy by 2.5%, but the reports have now changed. It is reported, on the contrary, that the Russian economy is not falling, so growing by 3.6%. This year, growth was even faster at 5.4% in the first quarter. Against this background, for comparison, the German economy is falling by 0.9%. The Ministry of Finance predicts the growth of the Russian economy in 24 by 3 and 2%, and these will be higher growth rates than the economies of countries that have introduced anti-Russian sanctions. What it turns out is that sanctions didn't work or worked, but not there. It does not help European bureaucrats to fight the so-called loopholes that make it possible to circumvent their own restrictions. For example, Austria still receives about 900% of its gas from our country. Moreover, Chancellor is not Hammer, but he is the last European leader who has never come to Kiev since the start of the special operation to say that they will not stop these supplies. It is said that Austria always received gas from Russia during all wars and conflicts. In an interview with the German Weltner, Hammer gave the example of Scholz and the German economy, which arrives in recession. In prosperous Austria, everything is not so bad yet. But here too, there is an economic crisis, inflation, rising rents, the threat of homelessness, poverty due to high electricity prices. Austrians simply cannot afford to pay their bills. As a result, people are forced out onto the streets.